Welcome to the Parents with Questions podcast. This is the show where we explore how to help parents, kids and families thrive in the midst of great change and global uncertainty. My name's Adam Gibson, and as a parent, I've got a lot of questions right now about how we raise healthy, happy, uncoercible, super conscious kids, given the world's completely different to how we thought it was even 3 years ago. This is a podcast to educate, inspire and empower all of us as parents to join us as we ask the big questions, talk to leading experts and empower ourselves along the way to do the best job we possibly can for the people we love the most. You're here on purpose as their parent. You're raising dragon slayers in a time when they're actual dragons. We're not here to tell you what to do, but we'll offer pathways forward. Welcome to the Parents with Questions podcast. All right, so we'll start the recording from here. So welcome everybody, it's Adam Gibson and I'm joined today by Warren Black. Now Warren is a former lawyer, an accountant and founder of the Global Wealth Club. He's what many people call Australia's answer to Robert Kiyosaki of Rich Dad, Poor Dad fame. And he offers, I believe, a unique perspective and what he calls a financial plan B for everyday families in Australia to thrive in these fairly unprecedented economic times. The quote from Warren this morning, I'm going to kick it off with, is in COVID phase 1, they came for our health. And in COVID phase 2, or what Warren calls it COVID phase 2, aka the Great Financial Reset, they're going to be coming for your wealth. So we're, in his words, phase 1 will seem like a picnic if we're not prepared. So today's discussion is all about what's coming and how do we prepare. Warren, thanks for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. Great to be here, Adam. It's good to get the word out. Like the fact you're doing it. Yeah,
well, it's important stuff for all of us. And the worst thing we can do is be unprepared and be asleep when the wave hits, right? But given that sort of water analogy, we're sailing into uncharted waters and into rocky, into some big surf and big waves. What are we sailing into and how do we prepare? So let's start with this. What is this Great Financial Reset? What uncertain times do you see as coming ahead? What do we need to be aware of?
Look, the main thing with anything, Adam, is to be factual, be pragmatic, and when it comes to something like this, because you can kind of, as humans, we tend to do one of two extremes, I find. We either go too extreme, but we want to live in a delusion and that everything's fine and perfect when it's really not. Like our body's in agony, but we're pretending we don't have, an injury or cancer or whatever else when we do. And then there's the other extreme where we tend to get absolutely paranoid. We're seeing demons in every corner, that kind of stuff. So the answer is always, I think in the Taoist teachings, they talk about walking the balanced or the middle path. And you've always got to look at facts. So in terms of Great Financial Reset, I think it's fair to say, and I'm sure you would agree with me, but our current economic system and what's happening in the Western world just isn't sustainable, because generally for a system to work, it has to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to get ahead at some level. And if people choose not to, there'll always be rich and poor in any society, because just some people will be like, we don't care, we won't take our opportunities. When a system becomes a problem is when, even for those who do take action, they do work hard, they take their opportunities, there's still too many impediments against them, like cost of living is out of control, for example, or debts is too high, or, for example, 30 years ago, buying a property, I mean, just about anyone, I remember when I first started in my first job over 30 years ago, I mean, I was on a pretty low income at the tax office, and I was able to buy a property, I couldn't obviously go and buy a luxury home in the middle of the mountains, overlooking the city or something, but I could buy something, I could get a place. And whereas today, that's just not the case. I mean, the median property prices compared to the actual average income, I think it's like about 12 or 13 to 1 now or something crazy or more. Whereas in 1965, it was 3 to 1. So the average income times 3, that was the average property price. So, and then you got the rental crisis. So there's just a lot of problems. And when you've got most of the younger generation screaming for socialism, they don't really want to get ahead. They don't see any dream of buying a property. yeah, you're going to have a problem. You're going to have consequences. And invariably, the only way through it is some kind of huge collapse or reset to balance everything out. I mean, it's like when the stock market gets over bloated or cryptos get out of control. It's no different. So for me, it's just common sense. It's just logic where as soon as you start to get out of control on cost of living, the currency's got bloated. You just have to look at South Africa, you got to look at Germany, you got to look at Venezuela, and we just can't think we're immune in the Western world just because right now America's the most powerful country in the world, especially when America is fast declining as a power. It's turned into a divisive, on the edge of civil war kind of a place. Yeah, look, we've got problems ahead. I don't think it takes too much to realize that. And I think it's like with COVID when it happened. It's inevitably when things go bad, they tend to go worse. And when things get better, they tend to get better. That's how life seems to work. So, yeah, I think we're heading for perilous times ahead. I don't think there's much doubt about that.
Yeah, look, it's certainly. I think we've both got enough grey hair to recognise that the last feels like the last 30 years has been on the up and the up without any real major dips. Almost, it feels like the economy just continues to expand and things get more expensive and everyone makes money, and it feels to me like there's no natural ebb and flow at all. And I kind of my point being that if it's expanded to this degree, when the balloon pops, it's going to be fairly dramatic, right?
Yeah, and the thing is, most people that I meet who are younger want a crash. They want something because it's like, and I'm talking about very intelligent, very balanced young people, not young people who are extremist activists, but like family members, ones who just straight out say, look, we have no hope of buying a property. They want the system to crash. They want properties to be taken from people. They say that straight out or indirectly. They want some form of socialism. They want some form of a government reset and a fresh start to start again. And in ancient cultures, when it got blurred, they even like in the original Hebrew culture, they had a reset locked in provision within their economic system. So every 50 years, the system would reset. All debts would be forgiven. All basically the monetary system would be reset and they'd start again, a bit like a game of Monopoly. So it was in that place. And as soon as you got any kind of monetary system, it's not based on a pure intrinsic value change. And I think most people just don't understand money. Like money can be anything really. It's like you, me, and 20 other people could go and live in the forest and have a barter system that involves changing things that we think of value, like furs or coins or sticks that are carved in a certain way or whatever else, like societies have done in history. Whereas we got this on a massive scale where we're all using a system, but not only though, is it just an exchange of value. You've got a centralized group in the middle, a group of private bankers and governments who can bloat the economy up. They can print money and just creating more and keep creating more and keep creating more, but none of it's actually got any real intrinsic value. It's just a dollar figure. And so just logic tells you that can't keep going on forever. It's like thinking that Monopoly, when you're playing it, will keep going forever. And when you keep doing it, eventually the game ends. And I had a client, a very wealthy client, who showed me statistics. And on average, every 90 years, a system like we've got has to reset 90 years. And the last time was 1933. So we're right due for one right now.
Okay, that was the question I was just about to ask, because I've personally been hearing about this kind of imminent crash for about a decade, it feels like. And certainly a lot in the last few years. But is that why now, do you think? Is there markers there that we're going to be prepared, or do we still have time, or what do you think is happening?
Oh, look, we could have time. And people have extraordinary ability, especially like today with life support, for example. It's like people who just died 30 or 40 years ago just keep living in, people with Alzheimer's, or like my father's got dementia. It's terrible. And as I said to someone, my father would have been dead if it had been like 40 years ago, whereas now he's kept alive. But is he really happy? He's in a nursing home. He's got on life support. And so now with all of the technology, we can keep a system on life support, which is what's happening. It's obviously failing. Most people can't get ahead with it anymore. Governments and the tax system and the kind of corporate kind of takeover and the violation of human rights is just, we saw that in COVID. I don't need to go too much into that. So the system is being kept alive on life support. And who knows? I like what my brother-in-law said, who's actually a qualified economist and used to work closely with the government as a very high-level advisor and someone I have a lot of regard for his opinion. And keep in mind, my brother-in-law isn't what I'd call, we have very different views. He's a lot more supportive of the system than I am. So this is not someone who's a bit more conspiracy bent, or I'm a bit more open-minded to stuff. But he said to me, logic tells me, an example he said to me about a year ago, he said, the property market, there's no possible way this can sustain. He said, when you got this kind of prices, everything tells you it's going to crash. He said, does it mean it will crash next year? Probably not, because he said, people need houses and people will find a way to do it. But the only thing we do know is when it does crash, and when the inevitable happens one day and China decide we don't want to buy, or this happens, or they want to get rid of our Australian investments, he said the crash will be horrific. He said that's the only thing, just logic tells you. This is from a very mainstream economist kind of thinker. And everyone I've spoken to is like that. So yeah, look, it could last for another 5 years. It could last for another 10 years. It could, but every year we wait. And all I can say, it's like in COVID, you know, it's whether you want to be, once it does collapse, it's like once a burglar breaks into your house, it's too late to get house insurance. You know, once you crash your car, it's not a good time to get car insurance. You know, when winter hits, it's not a good time for a squirrel to gather nuts. So this podcast for me is not really aimed at people who are kind of like wanting to, you know, fix things. I mean, people who want to fix things now because they're taking seriously what the Sun Tzu says in The Art of War. Plan for what is difficult while it's easy to do so. Right now, you can still plan. You can still put your finances in place. You can still do things right now, because when it's autumn, you can gather nuts. When your house hasn't been broken into, you can get insurance and put security. When your car has never had a crash, you can get cheap insurance with a no claim bonus. It all changes. And if World War hit next week and the market started crashing like tomorrow, most people would be caught running out the back of the house with their pants down. And it's just a case of, yeah, if you want to take that risk, great. For me, I think that we're certainly very, very close. And to me, any time from the next 6 months to the next 24 months, it's likely we're going to see some pretty major changes. And this is not just me. I meet highly wealthy people doing this. I was speaking to a client a few days ago who's living in Bali, was telling me how in Bali, where she's living, they teach about the Rothschilds. They actually teach about the economic system in the school their kids are in. She said Russian expats and Ukrainian and oligarchs and wealthy people and Americans, Australians everywhere are moving their money overseas. They're moving them into gold. They're moving them off grid because they all are expecting things to collapse. And I'm talking about wealthy oligarchs and the elite. So when the elite are doing this, you know full well that they are getting ready for it. So I'll put it this way. If people are willing to take a gamble that everything will keep going as it's going in the next 5 years, you are one brave soul and you have more faith than I have.
Yeah. Right, which then the obvious question then becomes, well, what do we do about it? And for most of us, I think myself included, you know, we have a bit of an idea of a financial plan, at least, that we've been working to for a number of years. Does that mean that plan goes out the window? And if so, does the financial plan B, as you call it, what's that look like, and how do we take these precautions? What do we do about this to, you know, immunize ourselves from the onslaught?
Look, you generally have transitions in any change. So it's kind of like when Uber came in, taxis didn't disappear. They just became more irrelevant. That's why when people say banks will go, I'm like, the banks won't go, but digital currencies, it will change. Some will become less relevant, things like that. So the current system won't suddenly end one day. Well, it's unlikely and everything stops and goes dark ages. I mean, that could happen, but that's a more unlikely scenario. And a more likely scenario is bit by bit, things will just keep changing and keep changing and keep changing. Like in COVID, one mandate comes in, another mandate comes in, the next minute people are waking up, their businesses they can't get into them, they've got vaccine mandates, they've got masks being put on them, everything. So that's kind of why I see it more going. It's just little bits and pieces, little bits and changes. So for me, you keep going as normal. It's kind of like changing jobs. It's like what I did years ago when I realized that I didn't want to be being a lawyer anymore. I just thought, I don't want to do that anymore. I had a transitional plan to shut my law firm down, and I slowly transitioned myself out of it. when I first started my first business, I slowly transitioned myself into it while still having contracting work on the side. It took me 3 years to fully transition out of contracting for someone into my own business. So I more see it as just starting your transitional strategy today, where you still do things like, I still invest in shares in the normal stock market, for example. I still buy things within the system. I still have money in banks. So I'd be a hypocrite to tell you not to do that. But you also want to start looking at other things, like, for example, do I trust the Australian government with all of my life that all the money that I'm holding in here, they won't do anything with it? I don't know about you, but after what happened with COVID, I think if the shit hit the fan, I highly doubt that Australia would honour my human rights when it came to my finances. Australia tends to have the approach that if there's a mole in your backyard, you don't kill the mole, you blow up the backyard. That tends to be how we work. So it's more just transitioning yourself out of it. Like you start building yourself offshore wealth. You start looking at other ways of doing things. And again, just look at what the Russian oligarchs are doing and the wealthy. What are they doing? All of them are still in the system. They've still got money in cash. They've still got money in shares. They've still got money in cryptos and whatever else they're in. But they've also having their plan Bs. They've got their extra second properties, or third or fourth or fifth, in more remote places, hidden away in case war hits and in case there's a fuel shortage. They've got their private retreats on islands away. They've got their plan B place over in Bali or in Thailand. They've got their gold held in Singapore or in an off-grid place. They've got cryptos put in some other things and things like that. So in other words, they've got their plan B alongside. So if they suddenly wake up one day, and I think if you want to get a good example, just look at what happened to Russia and Ukraine when the war started. So a lot of Ukrainians were caught out because suddenly they couldn't access any of their stuff anymore online. And those who didn't have cash were in deep shit. They couldn't basically buy stuff, whereas those who had cash could function. Even in Russia, when the sanctions hit, the two people who got caught out heavily one was normal citizens who relied heavily on the Western banking system, because Russia had become more westernized at that time. A lot of digital nomads were living in Russia. They were, using Western banks, and suddenly they couldn't access them because as Russian citizens, they'd been stopped. And if they didn't have cash, they were in a lot of trouble. Then you had Russian oligarchs who had been a little bit less smart, and they had a lot of their wealth sitting in the Western world, and they just got frozen. Where some of the more cautious, conservative, paranoid Russian oligarchs, they were by and large unaffected. They just, because their wealth was in some kits and in various other places. So the reason I'm saying that is that it's a good time to be prepared. I mean, logic tells you we're heading for some real problems. COVID showed you that government got away with some extraordinary violations of human rights, and they got away with it. Like, people can say they'll be held accountable. Maybe. Fact is that right now, as we speak, they got away with it. Like, straight out got away with it. So you can't tell me the governments will be sitting there going like, oh man, that was really bad we did that. Far out, man, that was a bit naughty. Let's just be lovely to our citizens in future. No, I think they'd be like, awesome, let's just see what we can do next. So
yeah. But I want to dig into, so I want to bring this down to, out of oligarch level and back into everyday level in terms of a plan
absolutely,
B. Right? But before we do that, probably the point that is occurring to me as we're speaking, and I know you've spoken to me privately about this, is the irony in this is, as this turbulence approaches, there is, attached to that are some once in a lifetime opportunities around wealth and money and income, right?
Mate, COVID for me was wonderful for that reason, wonderful. COVID was wonderful for me because suddenly, because I was positioned online, ready for it. I mean, imagine that you don't do any physical business anymore, which I hadn't at that time, and I'd gone all online. I mean, my business took off. So generally, people who are ready for this, you're just going to clean up. Like, the world's not going to stop. Like from all what I'm saying, it just is wealth doesn't just disappear. It just changes form. So it's just a case of, it's going to be wealth in new places where it was previously. That's your plan B. And if you're positioned for it, you're going to do really, really well for not doing an awful lot. It's that simple.
Gotcha. Right. Well, that sounds pretty good. So let's dig in. You've identified, I think, 7 or 8 steps around a plan B, around what the areas to look at. Can we step through those piece by piece?
Absolutely.
And I'm going to just say up front for those listening, Warren has agreed to present for us a live masterclass and question and answer session, a live session, in a couple of weeks' time to our listeners and members. So I'm going to give you details on how to join that at the end, but we'll run through each of these items here now and each of these steps, and then we'll go into more depth in our masterclass coming up. But if you could go ahead, Warren, and talk us through what your sort of 8-step formula is, if you like.
Oh, look, it's like anything. You could always have a 50-step formula or a 6-step formula. I just have come up with 8 simple steps that are they're not like perfect, but these 8 steps will get you in a pretty good position, along with my bonus 9th point I've got. So yeah, 8 steps that I think if you follow all these 8 steps, you're going to do pretty well. You're not going to have any problem. So the first one is just boosting your income. So boosting or securing or stabilizing your current income in some way. So one of the things that we talk about there is, 3 ways to kind of boost your income, stabilize your current income. So I always say just start with how you're making your money, like right now, and is it still going to be there? And let's just give a simple example. Like, let's just say that AI is frightening how it's going right now. And throughout history, and I'm just going to diverge on the AI and this income and then keep on this topic so I'm not get distracted. It's just because throughout history, I've had people terrified of AI, and I just say, look, every change in history, people have resisted it. But like what I've seen, like the Industrial Revolution, people were screaming like, you can't take humans away and bring machines in. And now, of course, we laugh. Like, we could not keep up with the production if we didn't have that. I know yours truly proudly said, and this is where I want to acknowledge my failings yours truly proudly said over 20 years ago, people will never buy clothes, shoes online because people always want a real live human to sit there and basically do it for you. And I was spectacularly wrong. I now buy stuff online myself with clothes after being horrified of how blatantly wrong I was, I just straight out said people will never actually do that, and people actually did do that. Kodak went broke because they proudly would say people will always want physical cameras. They'll never necessarily want to go and do streaming online, and Kodak were wrong. So the thing is, most of what we believe today, we're going to be wrong on. And this is what, if you go back 5 years ago as to what you believed about the world, I bet you'll sit there and find at least 3 things you missed the boat by about 10 million miles. Am I right?
Everything I believed about the world 5 years ago was different, I think, mate.
And we're going to be wrong again. I said this the other day to my dance teacher, but there's going to be robots and an AI that will teach people dancing. And she goes, people will always want a real life dance teacher. I said, but you're wrong. I said, the thing is, you're probably going to be wrong. I'm saying, yes, some people will. But if people can get an AI system, because the AI doesn't have a bad day like you do, it doesn't get sick like you do, and things like that. So I said every major change in history, when the internet first came out and people going online, yours truly was proudly saying things like, nah, people will always want real life workshops and things like that. Fortunately, I was smart enough to realize about 10 years ago I was totally wrong, and I made changes. So AI is no different. AI is going to replace jobs everywhere. People who, like lawyers who think they're secure, are going to find out that robots are now doing their contracts for them, like this new softwares. I've been seeing AI do stuff for me, but it shocks me. Like I could in 2 minutes now create a PowerPoint presentation of the life of Barack Obama, teach a webinar on this, charge people for it, and it took 2 minutes to create it all through AI software. So AI is changing the world. So you want to secure your income in some way, which means so the 3 steps I talk about are things like, number 1, with your current job, make sure you're upskilling yourself in your current job and asking yourself how secure it actually is. Number 2 is to actually, and seeing is it going to last into the future. Upskilling yourself is definitely very important. And starting to see if there's ways you can use your current skills to increase your income, like get more pay. And basically, even things like, are there ways that I can, diversify from my current skill set to make more money doing other things? Like for me, I mean, I once upon a time thought me knowing about structures and laws meant I could only be a lawyer or accountant. Now I do podcasts, I teach on all kinds of different areas. I've used those skills now of investing. I've used them with so many other things in my life. So just upskilling yourself, securing your current income, seeing if it's sustainable, making sure that you stay really relevant, because the best people in any profession will always stay basically, will not only continue to work, but will probably get paid more than ever. So to me, the future is going to be specialization. If you're not really skilled at what you do, you're going to be replaced by outsourced staff or by robots. It's that simple. Like bookkeepers in Australia got replaced by a lot of overseas bookkeepers. Many VAs got replaced because you can get them offshore for about 1/5 of the price. So it's just, this is the biggest thing, the first thing of your income. Really secure your income. Take a critical look at what you're doing, and don't just assume that you'll never be replaced, because the truth is you probably will, you know.
Warren, I'll just interrupt you on this because there's a point to add to this from my perspective. I believe that this is arguably the most crucial piece of everything you're about to start saying, insofar as having like most people were coerced and mandated against because of their job and their threat of losing job, losing income, etc. That was a major sort of inflection point for most people.
Yes.
Having the ability to be entrepreneurial and replace your income and not be reliant or attached to a job by virtue of your creativity and entrepreneurialism, that to me is a pretty important skill to develop, because that's where you have true independence. You go, well, stick your job, I won't take it, I'll go do something different. I personally had that experience with a business partner at the beginning of COVID, and they said, oh, before you come into the office, make sure you pretend to get a vaccine and put a mask on. I said, shove it, we're out of business. And I walked away from it after 3 years of building that business, and I walked away on the spot, said, no, we're done, and started something new. And only because I had a lifetime as an entrepreneur in that way of thinking and training myself that way, that was easy. So I'm just going to throw that in. I think, the more entrepreneurial we are, and even if it's a side hustle or just getting into that space, the more confidence we have in saying, I don't need this job as much as you might think I do. That kind of approach.
I absolutely love that, because that was the biggest thing with COVID, wasn't it? The coercible side. Like many people who said, I will hold the line, once they realized they couldn't pay for their family, they couldn't feed their kids, their mortgage, people gave in, Not many people got the strength to say, I'll pay whatever price to do it. And although in theory that would be amazing to be like that, you're better off to set yourself up so you can't be coerced, and you can do that by upskilling yourself and creating income streams that are independent from this, and really knowing that no matter what happens, that if things change, like in COVID, you could readapt. And I met many people who did readapt, people who were fortunate enough they'd started taking steps to upskill themselves, and when it hit, there were a lot of people also who got caught right out, and they were brave enough to basically, say no, but they had to frantically go and get extra income streams. And in many cases, they had no money for a while. So I reckon life would go much smoother if you're doing that. You're creating income, you're upskilling yourself, find ways to increase your income, because the best people will still need humans. Don't misunderstand. So just because AI comes in, people still need humans, if nothing else, to automate the machines and to run the machines and keep an eye on them. So just look at things like, I'll give you an example, Adam. When I became a lawyer, I remember thinking to myself, what's going to be always in demand? And I thought, well, death and taxes are the two things that they say it's hard to get away from. So that was literally what I specialized in: taxation planning and estate planning. Do you think I ever was short of work? No, I was always in demand, because people, as far as I know, keep dying, and that's not going to stop anytime soon. And unless the governments wake up one day and decide they don't want to tax people anymore, which again, I don't see happening anytime soon, there's always going to be work for that. So that's what I'm talking about. Your first step is securing your current income.
Yeah. Well, while we're on that, I think let's talk tax reduction. Tax reduction is one of these steps. Is that right? Is that a part of?
Yeah, tax reduction is down the chain a little bit, but asset protection, to keep greedy gold digging predators far from your assets, and 100% legal tax minimization. That's step 2.
Okay. Well, talk us through asset protection. What does that mean? Even, a lot of people listening haven't got, or don't even assume, they go, well, I haven't got any great assets. What does that mean? But what does it mean for the average person?
Oh, look, all I say, if you've got no money, you don't have to worry about any of this. So if you've got not much cash, and that's one way to protect your assets, just don't have any. The
Yeah.
other
Okay.
way is to have it, but appear like you've got none. In other
Okay.
words, be a penniless bum, so to speak, on paper, which means that and in terms of what I say in asset protection, the example I give, and I'll ask everyone listening to this podcast, including you, Adam. Adam, do you own a car?
Yes.
Do you have car insurance?
Yes. I've just renewed it
Why?
today.
I mean, what?
Uh,
Why? Do you expect to crash your car the next week or something?
um, no, but it's a possibility. So I account for that possibility. Yeah.
Bingo. Perfect.
Yeah.
Do you have health insurance?
Yep.
Yeah. Do you expect to get sick in the next little while, like really badly ill and be in hospital getting a horrible operation the next few days or week?
I'm not planning on it, but there is a possibility. Yeah. Or a much smaller possibility. Yeah.
So you're doing it not because you expect it, but you want to make sure that your life doesn't get turned upside down
Yeah.
if any of those events happen. So
Yeah.
what I would ask you, I mean, you're probably the wrong person, you probably do, but I'd ask people listening to this, what about your net worth? Is your assets all secured that you would know, but if some corporation went after you tomorrow, they wouldn't get anywhere near you? Do you know that for sure?
No, I'm no, I think, I've been a bit, actually, I'm not going to answer too much on this personally, but yeah, I can completely see the point and I see how vulnerable most of us are in that regard.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So isn't it ironic? We'll protect our car, we'll protect our health, but
Mm,
then we don't protect our net worth from if any government or someone suing you. And the average business owner in Australia now gets a threat to be sued or sued 3 times in their lifetime, according to statistics. So my question to you is that if you woke up tomorrow and knew you're going to lose everything, would that stress you a bit or would you be cool about it?
well, I'd be stressed.
Yeah,
I'd
you'd
be
be
stressed.
stressed. Yeah, and most people would be stressed. They wouldn't stay awake at night. So asset protection is like, again, plan for what is difficult while it's easy. Squirrels gather nuts in autumn, not in winter. And that's my concept. So the best time to protect your assets is right now when no one's looking at you. Because if you try to do it when people are looking at you, there's all kinds of provisions that can undo it. You could be charged with evading creditors as a criminal offense, everything. So the best time to protect your assets, and there's so many simple ways, and I won't go too much into that in this podcast, but there's a good reason that the elite, that they're wealthy, and that the average, even most business owners have companies, trusts. They make sure their properties are not, their equity in their properties can't be touched by having, legal liens or securities over their properties. So
Yeah.
the point is, you want to protect it, and again, with taxes, I in some of my podcasts, I show people over a 20-year plan, over a 20-year period, if they were making, say, 10% per annum on $100,000, how much they have at the end of 20 years if I had no tax compared to 48% compared to 30%. And I think it's about 7 times more wealth you'd have if you were tax free. And I think even if you're paying some taxes like 15, 30%, you're going to end up 2 or 3 times better off than you are if you don't tax plan. So tax planning is a very important part. Like there's a good reason that the 56 richest Australians, according to Sydney Morning Herald study by Peter Martin in April 2016, only 2 of them paid taxes, and one was 4 grand, one was 54 grand. But all of them basically spent large amounts of money each year with the experts. So I'm not saying you're necessarily going to go away and pay no tax, but minimizing your taxes with companies, trusts, super funds, good knowing the basics for yourself, it's critical in any wealth creation plan B, because governments more than ever are running out of funds. They're behind in their collection since COVID. So there's instructions to pretty much go after any money they can get. So tax planning and protection is very important.
Gotcha. And like I'm hearing you, and it occurs to me as you're saying this, you compare it with insurance. We get advertised for insurance. We get advertised to get your car insured, get your home insured, health insured, and so on a regular basis, and it's an obvious step. Whereas, the majority of accountants and planners, for the most part, in my experience anyway, they're looking backwards and retrospectively and, getting your tax returns in, but not necessarily doing that forward planning and being a little bit, I'm not going to use the word creative, but being forward thinking and defense minded and protection minded. So really having someone like you in the corner is a critical element of that, isn't it? It's not something
Well,
you get on every
absolutely.
corner. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So if you like, Adam,
Yeah.
I'll go on to the third step now in my action.
Please do.
So the third one I've got is about growing your nest egg. That's the third one. So how do you do that? So the old Rich Dad Poor Dad Robert Kiyosaki is just about the cash flow quadrant. Just simply talks about even if you're an employee or self-employed and you're not a business owner or investor, which not everyone is, you can be investing your money. You can be saving, and I have a 10% rule. Like, it's something that every single wealth book I've ever read, from The Laws of Wealth, Richest Man in Babylon by Klassen, right through to Cashman Ponder's Dynamic Laws of Prosperity, Robert Kiyosaki and Rich Dad Poor Dad, Bob Proctor, You Were Born Rich. There seems to be a magic in the 10% rule that you put 10% aside for your future. And that 10% is money you just don't touch. That's money that you just keep growing. Any other savings you're doing for enjoying life, that's a second savings account you're doing. But you want to be putting at least 10% aside for your financial future. So putting it into cash as you build up. And I always say to people, start by saving enough money to have liquid funds. So that's 3 months of liquid expenses. So you've got that security in the back of your mind. And then after that, start getting into shares, property, cryptos, whatever else. So the third rule is grow your wealth, grow your nest egg. And I tell people that in 1 year, you can't do a lot, but in 10 years, Dr. John DeMartini in his Financial Mastery and even financial planners like Noel Whittaker and others say that you can pretty much, anyone can get basically financially established within 10 years, and most people can get financially independent if you just be consistent and keep showing up and keep doing it. So that's the third rule that I would say to people.
Yep.
The fourth rule is living within your means and managing your expenses. That's really important. Like, people these days, we live in such a dead economy. We want something, we don't feel we should withhold it. We haven't learnt this idea of delayed gratification very well. We're living in a generation that wants everything now. We'll go and borrow some money rather than going, well, hang on a sec, wouldn't it be better if I save up and get this? And, unless it's a property or something which does require a loan, but even then where you can possibly rent it out or whatever, you really don't want to be getting debt unless it's good debt, stuff that's actually going to help you get income or there's a really good reason for it. So managing your expenses, finding ways to cut your costs, finding ways to, even every 3 months in my business, I do an audit of all of our subscriptions, and I always find ones that are out of date, but we're still paying for, things like that. Finding ways to cut costs on food, for example, where you can still eat the best food, but not necessarily go and, things like that. So there's ways you can buy in bulk, or whatever, just simple ways where you can basically cut your expenses and really take time. I have a general rule that in my ideal fantasy world, every week I go over my budget, but in practical terms, at least once a month, I go over my budget, go over my expenses, have a look at where things are at. Has my net worth gone up or gone backwards in the last month? Is it just a market thing, or was it bad management? Are there expenses that I'm just paying I really don't need to, and I've got a bit silly? And even recently, I realized I'd been spending very foolishly on a few things where I'd been too lazy to manage it properly. So that's a fourth guide, just managing your expenses properly.
Yep.
The fifth one I've got here. So you want me to keep going through? You got any questions, Adam? Or?
No, look, I think this is great. This is no, keep going, please. Yeah.
Yep. The fifth one I've got is staying on top of debt and interest payments. And this is a really practical one I'm going to give people. I think people tend to do one of two extremes of this. And again, I'm all about getting rid of extremes. So like, even on the living within your means expenses, I'm not saying become a tight ass, because if you become stingy and tight ass, you tend to attract less because you energetically kind of close inwards. So I'm saying you still be expansive, but you just be wise. It's kind of like, to me, eating food. You want to enjoy your food, but if you eat too much, you'll get fat. And if you don't eat enough, you'll get anemic and weak. So it's the same with finances. The debt one, the one extreme is that I know people who literally pay all their debts first because they don't want to get into trouble, and they never save money for themselves. If you show me anyone who's financially having difficulties, and I'll show you 100% of the time someone who's not saving first for themselves, who are paying everyone else first. They're paying the tax office, they're paying the banks and everyone else. Oh, I've got to pay them or they'll take my house. So it's a fear thing. Whereas I say to people, it's very important to honor your debts, but first you honor yourself. My rule is if I have the choice of paying a creditor or me first, I'll pay me. Then and I tend to find that once I've done that, everyone else gets looked after. And I wasn't always like that. I used to pay everyone else first and I ended up going almost broke. So the fifth rule is managing your debt by, you're fine, but if you look after yourself first, then you pay your debts. So the mistake many people make is they say to me, oh, no, I do save. I put money into my line of credit. I'm like, no, that's not saving. That's just paying your mortgage. I said, you want to have separate savings? They said, yeah, but I'll pay more in interest. I said, but that's the whole point. You've got to save separately from your mortgage. And then anything else you can put on it sitting on there that you plan to spend, that's fine. So you want to make sure that practically you're managing it and that you first pay yourself, then you pay your debts, okay? Like the tax office, the banks, anyone that can basically make your life misery. Then, and there's an order of spending that I tend to say to people. First you, then pay the creditors that can cause you grief, then pay family living expenses, then pay other creditors, and then pay fun, things like that, all discretionary, and then pay anything else above that are treats, so like a bit of an order of priority. So managing your debt and interest payments, really staying on top of that. Number 6 is creating passive and residual income for your future. And, just start simply. And look, I've made this mistake myself. Often we kind of want to fast track it and we'll go and invest in some dodgy crypto or dodgy this. I'm not saying crypto's dodgy because I use it, but often if something's too good to be true, it actually is. Most people are easily scammed because all you have to say to people is that I said to someone, if I wanted to be a full-time scammer, it would be so easy. I need to say to them, God, I go and target like religious people and say, God is going to prosper you because he's promised great benefits, and this is a special program. It's for humanitarian purposes, and we found ways around a system. It's like the favor of God has been given to you, and you will make this. It's going to make 20% per week. It's kind of like a blessing of God, and it's being run by Christian people. And then straight away people will sign up. And the second one is you say, oh, it's a crypto. It's going to make all this money. We found a way to get around the elites banking system. There's these special programs that give. I mean, you can make up whatever shit you want. And the point is, I'm not saying that none of that's true, but there's a good reason why programs are available for the rich. And they certainly don't want the non-rich to get into them. And they have checks and balances to stop you from getting in. Like, for example, like you can't invest in many projects unless you're a sophisticated investor, as an example, under ASIC and SEC rules. So just work with where you're at, and really check into things. So create residual income by, even if it's just getting into shares with dividends or getting into banks with that, or a really stable crypto that gives regular payments, but something that meets certain criteria, or investing into businesses that, like buying into a business or something that can make you, make you good money or something like that, but something that meets things like that. And like anything, the more you get to understand and learn money, and I strongly encourage people to master money because knowing money will help you live a better life. Like investing in shares or investing in there's many ways you can do residual incomes, which are safe and stable, and they won't make you fortune. But making, say, even $100 a week residual income, is better than having no residual income. And that's a nice start. And then before you know it, you might have 200, and then you might have 300. And then 10 years time, you might suddenly be having 3,000 a month coming in, or 5,000 a month from properties or whatever. So the point is just
having on the treadmill, isn't it? It's about getting started and flexing the muscle to begin with for a lot of people, right?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So that's all I'll say on that one. But absolutely creating possession of digital income, but in a safe way. The seventh one, which I cannot emphasize enough, and is probably the most important and should have been done at the start, but 7 is a magic number, they say. So that's why I've chosen this for number 7. Master your mindset to attract prosperity. If you gave me a choice of saying you're going to lose one of two things tomorrow, Warren, you're either going to lose all the money you've made to date and be broke, but you will keep your mindset, and in fact, it will be improved. You'll be upgraded, so you have a better mindset around wealth. Or you're going to lose your mindset around wealth, but I'll give you $1 billion. I would be like, no, I'll keep the mindset, because number one, I'll have greater happiness. I'll have a sense of sovereignty. I'll know I can always create it again. And that was why a great billionaire once said, lost everything. But he said, when did he know? When did you know that you would make your money back again? And he said, when I was lying on the park bench broke. Because in other
Mm.
words, he just knew he could create it again. It never fussed him otherwise. So you want to be doing lots about your mindset around money, knowing basics like that. In the same way that birds are looked after by Mother Nature, your God, your creator is always going to make sure you're looked after. Like
Mm.
there's like a higher creator that governs all of our affairs, and will always make sure that we'll be looked after. And I learned that. I've had times in my life I was so sick that I couldn't work, I had no money, and things would happen. I still remember when I was literally broke. I had one son, I had twins on the way, I was sick, I couldn't work. My wife was fortunately an amazing woman, but she was stressed as heck at the.
Mm.
And I remember sitting there going like, we've got $65 in the bank. We've got, what are we going to do? I said, I don't know, but that's our creator's problem right now, because I'm not quite sure how to get out of this one. And then about minutes later, she gets called by a friend who was about to give a big donation to his church. And he kept saying to me, he said to her, I don't understand why. I feel you guys are in trouble. I need to give you my tithe rather than the church. And of course, she just started crying. And we saw so many things like that when we were going through a hard time. And I could keep you busy here, but when you got mindset and you're looked after, and you always live your life from the point of view of not the reactive brain, because when you're living in fear and survival, adrenaline, cortisol kicks in. It's kind of like you've got a lion on your path in front of you, and all you think about is a lion, and you want to run away from it. You want to be seeing beyond the lion.
Mm.
And just basically seeing the bigger picture, know there's problems on the way, but just know you're going to be looked after. And then that's going to keep your stress levels down, get you out of your amygdala, your fight, flight, and make sure you're staying in a mindset of like expansion, growth, prosperity, but you'll be fine. And that doesn't mean you won't have challenges. So mindset is critical, and I do a lot of teaching on mindset, like a lot. The eighth one I've got is compliance and bulletproofing your records for tax time and audit time, because most people, if you've ever played Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow game, one of the ways you lose your money is through a divorce or an audit. And so you want to make sure that your records are good, that your money's properly managed, that you got your records, your paperwork to basically do that. My experience is the more organized something is, the less drama it tends to have. And it's like with you, if you had the choice between investing in an organized hedge fund or in a chaotic guy who was all over the place, you choose the organized fund. Most people would, because they prefer stability of their money, where they get like paperwork, they get tracking, they get records of what they've done, all that kind of stuff. So money tends to attract to where it's nourished and managed. So, and the bonus tip, which I've got here, is just know your sovereign lawful rights under common law. And I think in COVID, people would really have loved to have known that. So you want to know, but ultimately that any government comes under, that we create governments, not the other way around. Like governments don't create us, we create governments. They're called public servants for a good reason. Their job is to serve us as the public. And when we make them the master and put ourselves under corporate government, they're not going to sit there and do good by us. More often than not, they're going to exploit us, enslave us, financially take from people. So you want to maintain sovereignty. Every society throughout history was about the sovereigns and the peasants or the slaves. Feudalism was about that. The Magna Carta, which a lot of people love to go, hey, that's my God-given rights. The Magna Carta was only ever put in place for sovereigns, for lords and barons. It wasn't put in place for the masses. So keep in mind, most of these great statutes of human rights and sovereignty were generally put in place for sovereigns who got very annoyed that governments were overstepping their reach of them. They weren't put in place for the peasants and those who chose to be slaves. So know your sovereign lawful rights. That's pretty much my little tips for your plan B.
Can you just expand on this, what that means in principle? Look, a lot of us over the last few years have heard of that and had some exposure to the idea of sovereignty, and it's a popular word right now. But what does it mean in real, on the ground, real time? That mean you don't have to pay taxes, or you don't? What does it mean for us? Can you dig in a bit further?
Yeah, look, it's like anything. I mean, sovereigns throughout history, they still paid some kind of taxes, but not the kind of taxes necessarily that the masses make. And in fact, the really high-level sovereigns don't pay taxes at all, because they are structured across the world. They've got their different assets in different places. they're giving back to society in other ways. Basically, the sovereign knows that they choose to give back to society because they want to contribute. And taxes is so, yeah, look, basically, when you're sovereign, there are ways to legally minimize your taxes and sometimes to become a plan B and go offshore, not pay taxes at all, and contribute in other ways. So it's more just knowing your sovereign lawful rights and knowing how everything works.
Okay. So that sounds like a topic we need to go spend a whole masterclass on that one almost.
Yeah.
Or to go down this road, I mean, some of this stuff to me, I mean, most of us have heard all these things, but I think what you're putting forward here is a cohesive plan
Yep.
that mashes all these things together in a way that they all work symbiotically. Is that a reasonable, it's all part of a larger picture? Yeah.
Yeah, so what we're teaching and what I'm about is not so much giving you a quick fix to a problem. It's a bit like your health is a mess, It's and you could go and do a quick detox or whatever, or doing a structured plan to improve your eating, strengthen your body, get a more holistic lifestyle. So in 12 to 18 months from now, you're in amazing health. And it's the same kind of thing. Anyone who does the kind of stuff we teach in the financial plan B, within 12 months, your finances can be a heck of a lot more stable. You can be a lot more secure. You can do a lot in 12 months if you're consistent. And we look at a holistic plan and cover all angles, not just one quick fix. That's kind of what I'm about.
Gotcha. Well, the next step for people, if they want to go down this road and take some proactive steps, or fill in the blanks on what they haven't done and learn more from you, we have organised for a live masterclass, which at this point is scheduled for the 24th of August. That's free to those who've subscribed. The address to subscribe to that is, I'll put in the notes here, but it's go.globalwealthclub.com/your-financial-plan-b/. So I'll put that in the show notes, but it's basically globalwealthclub.com/your-financial-plan-b. And at that class, Warren, you'll be going through each of these in more detail, workshopping and answering questions for people specific. Is that fair point?
Absolutely, yes. Please excuse me. I had to just quickly go and answer the door. So,
no worries.
Yeah. So look, good thing about being more relaxed about it. So yeah, that's a short answer. We're doing a masterclass to give people a bit of an idea of your financial plan B. So it's going to give you the 8 steps. It's going to be free. It's going to show you the 8 steps you can do for yourself. I'm a big believer in giving, and just to be clear, because often people think, oh yeah, it's going to be a sales thing. No, it's actually going to be a very, very good teaching, because one thing I've learned, this has been my philosophy. And I ask people, and I ask you, Adam, how much does it cost you to use Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, or WhatsApp?
Nothing.
Nothing, yeah. So most of their customers get a free service, but the ones who do invest in the higher things for Facebook, Instagram, that's why they're profitable in the world. So I'm a big believer in giving the best education, the best teaching. So if you really want to go away and do it yourself, you will be able to. You will get a really good plan. And then obviously at the end, of course, we will be offering options for people to purchase, more advanced programs to give more help, more mentoring and everything else. But yes, we'll be teaching you these 8 steps, going into them in more detail. So you'll walk away with the basic tools to go away and implement your own financial plan B. That's the aim of the masterclass. So you'll be getting my best stuff.
I have to say, look, one of my frustrations, I think many of us feel this now, is having people with expertise and knowledge like yours who, are awake to what's going on in the world is a rare thing. So many people in your profession, both in law and in finances and accounting, are really, part of the matrix, to use that vernacular. It's, they're just part of the system and can't see what else might be out there, and some of the truths that a lot of the more freedom-minded community are part of and can awake to. And I think that's a rare thing. I'm very glad that, your awareness of what's going on can be, can be mashed in with a real step-by-step plan for everyday people. So,
my pleasure.
On this. Mm,
Look, I've got a bit of a self-interest in this because at the end of the day, if we empower people, Adam, in their sovereignty and their financial freedom, and you get enough people do it, and you get a big enough critical mass, we could end up making our country a lot better, and we may
mm,
end up mitigating a lot of the worst effects of what's coming. That's the thing, because a lot of the more you study consciousness and populations, what's made Australia so vulnerable is our convict mindset, which we saw really clearly throughout COVID. If we have more people empowered and looking after their finances, securing themselves, and we have a bigger critical mass that gets through this, well, who knows the
yeah.
difference that we can actually make? I think we'll still got some problems in the world ahead, because just because you're the healthiest person in a leper colony doesn't necessarily mean that life's going to be good. If anything, it's worse, because you've got to spend your life trying to avoid the idiots, or not the idiots,
Yeah.
but the sick people, or if you're living
Yeah.
in a world of idiots. But the point I'm saying is that the main thing is to realize that I can't necessarily change the world, but I can change the life of a lot of different people.
Mm.
And even though I think the world is heading for serious trouble, it doesn't mean that your life has to be in serious trouble. Quite the contrary.
No. And as you said, mate, just on the macro level, if enough Australians had that uncoercibility of, my finances are in good shape and you don't own me in my job or anything like that, and they had that sort of financial strength and confidence, we would have all said no, and the whole thing wouldn't have happened in the last 4 years. That's the thing I keep going back to.
Yeah, well, my favorite on that is in Thailand when they tried to bring in speeding cameras. I think within a month they got rid of them because everyone just ignored it. And yeah, I know in COVID there were places that straight up just ignored it, and so they very quickly, like Florida, people just pushed back because they had a very strong church contingent in Florida. So because they had a very strong church contingent who had that missionary mindset that just said, we're not going to let some, atheist or secular government start telling us what to do with our bodies and our rights, and they kind of told them where to go, and some pastors were put in jail. Within 6 weeks, they released the pastors from jails with huge apologies, and they removed all the lockdowns, and Florida is now known as the land of the free. So yeah, it's exactly, if people become uncoercible and have got no problem and they've got their things in place, you've secured your wealth, you've got your financial things established, you can give the middle finger to the government if you need to, when someone does some really bad law. And that's what we want. We don't want to be gaslighted or abused. We want to be uncoercible. So I like that.
Yeah, cool. Warren, look forward to the masterclass. Thanks for your time, mate. I know you got another meeting to go to, but we will speak and get to meet you all in person in a couple of weeks time.
Absolutely.
Very good.
Look forward to it.